Hi, and welcome to another episode of Wisdom on the Front Porch. And on my front porch today, we have Liz here, and Liz is in beautiful Virginia. Is that correct?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. I knew it wasn't right. I'm saying it, and it's like, I think that's the word she said. But it's nice there. It's nice here in Texas. So, going to have a great show. So, tell our audience just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am primarily a business advisor consultant, and I work with boards of directors, business owners in the C-suite on three primary areas. I help them, what I always say, focus on the right things at the right time to get the right impact to improve profits, performance, and the culture. And how we do that is three ways. I facilitate strategic planning activities, whether it's a retreat or a series of work sessions, to lay out a very clear, concise plan of where they need to go heading forward. As part of those conversations, invariably, when we're talking about how does your organization need to move forward, we discuss how it might need to be reorganized. And then even if it doesn't need to be reorganized going forward, what type of talent do you need? So we talk about succession and workforce planning. So we do a lot of work with identifying future leaders and gaps in skill sets and things like that. And then the third thing that we do is some leadership training, but more and more, I'm doing a lot of individual and executive team coaching and advisory work to really help individuals and teams up their skills and be able to implement the plans that they've created. And I'm also a keynote speaker and author.
Oh, nice. Oh, an author. What have you written?
I've written 10 books. One
Nice.
of them is called Something Needs to Change Around Here, the 5 Stages to Leveraging Your Leadership. And it's really one of the core books that I use when I'm working with a lot of my clients and understanding how to change the way they think and then behave as leaders to really, number one, develop themselves, but more importantly, also develop the teams that they're responsible for.
Oh, nice. That sounds really great. I have to have you on my other podcast. It's reading between the words. Ah, that sounds wonderful. So, how did you get into this line of business? Is that the right way to say it? How did you get to where you doing what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, it actually started out, I, as we were talking before we started, I grew up in Wisconsin in a small farming community. And um, at the time, I thought my options were to be a teacher, to work in a factory, or just basically not anything that was really intriguing at the time, or live on a farm. And I wasn't interested in any one of those three at the time. And so I intentionally got my undergrad degree in international business. And during my capstone class of my undergraduate degree, it was taught by a man named Jim Farrell, and he was this thing called a consultant. And until I had met him for that class, I thought I wanted to be a commodities broker. I thought it would be really cool for some weird reason to work at the docks and have these huge ships come in, and I'd be saying, that's going to Bangkok and this is going to, Zimbabwe. I just thought that would be really cool. But when I had this class with Mr. Farrell, and he wasn't a professor, he was a consultant, and he was teaching a
Mhm.
capstone. He would talk about how he worked with businesses and leaders of organizations to help them do their jobs better as leaders, as business owners, as companies. And I just thought it was fascinating because he was applying all the different topics that I had covered in my undergrad. He was helping people be better at their jobs, and he wasn't stuck with any one company. He would move from organization to organization. So it really kind of sparked an interest in me, is that someday I would like to do that. So flash forward, because I came from a small town in Wisconsin, a small farming community, and I had this degree in international business, I could not find a job when I was nearing graduation. So
Oh,
what I did was I took a job, I took an internship with the Department of State in Washington, because in order to get a job in international business where I grew up, you needed international experience. Well, you couldn't get international experience unless you got a job. So hence the internship. And luckily, the internship was with the State Department version of the military commissary system. So it really was a perfect fit because it put me in a situation where I was helping people who were stationed at the American embassies and consulates around the world figure out how to get food for the families that were living on the US compounds. So it was exactly what I had wanted to do. And I will tell you, I found within 6 months of doing that internship that I would poke my eyeballs out if I had to do that for the rest of my life, because it was at the time, this is way before the internet and way before, emails. We were dealing with cables and things at the time. And the communication system was just awful. It would take, 6 weeks to communicate some information. And meanwhile, you've got a ship of food, not leaving the port yet, and people think it's 6 weeks in transit. So anyway, during that period of my life, I was really fortunate in that the office needed to be staffed up dramatically. And so I was offered a contract position with that office upon my graduation. And within a very short period of time of me working there, I started traveling international and going to American embassies and consulates around the world and teaching the people who were responsible for the commissaries how to basically run these businesses, because they had no business training. They were foreign service officers, or they were diplomats of foreign service officers. Some of them were local nationals with some experience, but for the most part, they didn't have any experience doing this. And so it was part of my job to train them. And then in that position also, I started my graduate work. And one of my teachers there, again, was this thing called a consultant. And I talked to him about it. And he said, yeah, it's great, but you don't have any experience yet. You can't really teach anybody how to be a better leader because, you're like 24 years old. What business owner who's in their 40s, 50s, or 60s is going to listen to you? You got to get some more experience behind you.
Right.
And, it was kind of a kick in the gut, but I knew he was right. And so what I did after 10 years is I left the State Department and I started my own training company. So I started training on leadership and supervisory skills because it was a part of what I had done with my job when I was contracting with the State Department. I organized conferences to train people around the world. And I had trained my own staff there and developed a staff. So it was
So,
something I had done
I want
there.
to interrupt you here and talk about that a little bit because here you are, you're working for a corporation, then all of a sudden now you're leading everything. You're the one in charge. You're the one making the rules. You're the one setting it. How did you make that transition? Was it just one day you said, okay, that's it. I've had enough. I'm going to start my own, or did you have a little bit of help along the way to do that?
Well, I knew I had known for years that I wanted to have my own company. I just didn't know what.
Okay.
I couldn't sell retail. It was just not within my mindset. But I knew I wanted to start my own company because I came from a family of entrepreneurs.
Oh, okay.
And so I didn't know what it was until I met my professor when I was in graduate school. And he said, you can't be a consultant. He said, but you
Right.
can train. He said, because, that's what you do as part of your job. And it was fortuitous because around that same time, for my job, I had attended one of these like skill path workshops, or Fred
Okay.
Pryor
Yeah.
workshops from years gone by. And I remember sitting in that class and I started looking around and counting all the people in class and counting how much we had all paid to be there. And I was like, I could do this. Um,
Done that
and
too.
so what I did, it was a kind of one of those life transitioning moments. My father died, and
Oh, I'm
a couple
sorry.
different things happened, but it was like, Liz, it's time to step out and take a risk and transition and do what you really want to do and do what you need to do now. And so I just quit. I mean, I obviously gave notice and things like that, but I stopped and I did exactly what I would never tell anybody to do. I started the business with no clients, no outlook, no nothing. I just stopped my full-time job and then I started building it from the ground up. But
Wow.
what I did have was I had relationships with a lot of the military bases. I'm close to the DC area. And so I was able to fairly quickly start getting some contracts with some military bases to do training there. So I started training on, as I said before, supervisory skills and leadership skills and basically any topic anywhere that if you were in a supervisory position or a management position and you needed help with managing conflict or even grammar and business communications, I was teaching myself how to train the gamut of that. And
Wow.
that's really how it started.
Yeah, so you 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 still were teaching yourself, you still were learning while you were teaching the others, but you were taking it from what you wanted to do. And I love that you saw what you wanted, and even though they said no, you can't do it now, it wasn't okay, that's the key word. I can't do it right now, but I can do it after I get some more training and I can get some more um, leverage behind me. And then I can. So you didn't just say, oh, well, if I can't do it, I'm just not going to do it. You just
Right.
found ways to keep going. And then you finally decided, okay, I've had enough. It's time for me to move on. And
Well,
that
and
that
what
was
happened
scary.
also was, I started a training company, and as I said, in one way, I'm kind of doing every topic under the sun, and it's kind of like a buckshot approach. But what happened about 10 years into my training company is clients then started asking me to do more consulting type work with them. And they're the ones that started asking me to facilitate their
Okay.
strategic planning sessions. I didn't initiate it. My clients started initiating it. And
Nice.
it was a signal to me that my MBA professor had been right, is I had to I had to earn the street cred with
Right.
my clients, who saw in me things that I didn't know if I was ready to do yet. Because obviously, if you've ever been in the training room and you're the trainer, if you're good, you're able to read the room and you're able to pick out fairly quickly. Either these people are getting it or they're not. It's way over their head or it's not, or it's way under them. You're
Right.
not on par with them. And there can be some groups where, they can make you feel like you don't know anything, and there's other groups that make you feel like you are, talking way beyond them. But I seem to be able to find my niche pretty quickly on the level of leader I could speak to
Okay.
comfortably, and carry conversations, and understand the internal workings of how they operated inside their organizations. So a long answer to your question, but it kind of evolved organically, but I knew what I wanted, and I was happy that all the pieces all tied together at the end.
Yeah, no, that's really great because I'm sure people are wondering, entrepreneurs are wondering, how do you get from one point to the next and how do you finally do that? But that was really great the way you explained that. I hope everybody's taking notes. I'm going to go back and watch and take notes. So it's not like one day you woke up, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go do this today, and then just expected to do it. You went in and you did the work you needed to do. Um, I know for a lot of entrepreneurs starting out, everybody says, oh, you do this, and this, and this, and then you've got it made and you can keep going, but somehow they forget to tell us that you also have to have the time put in. It's not gonna, you I mean, it's very rarely that you just all of a sudden pick a choice and say, okay, in 6 months I'm going to be here. I mean, you can do it, but you really need to get all the other experience in first. Um,
Yeah.
so that was good to show that. So there you are. You're now doing consulting. You're happy with it. What was next for you?
Well, I want to go back and share something to build upon what
Sure.
you just said, as far as the getting the experience. Um, One of the things, again, that people can easily say, I mean, you're teaching all these different topics. It's like you're kind of good at all and master of none. And I have a lot of colleagues that had training companies. There's like, wait a minute, you're teaching all of those topics? There's nobody that does that. And the reason I share that is, to this day, I don't regret doing that, because understanding all of these different topics and being able to weave them together, I think has really made me quick on my feet when I'm in front of a group. So when I'm facilitating a strategic planning session, when I'm coaching a team of executives, I can read the room, and very quickly we can change the conversation from talking business strategy to interpersonal skills to emotional intelligence to a better way of providing feedback to that employee to a better way of writing your mission statement so it's grammatically correct. And all of these different topics, I think, have just given me a much stronger base and has made me more flexible in what I can advise my clients on because I'm not just one or two dimensional. I've got a number
Right.
of different topics that I've got background in. And so because of that, um, where I'm heading with my business now is I am intentionally moving away from a lot of the training that was the base of my company. I'm no longer doing a lot of the long-term training programs. And I'm really focusing my time more on the business advisory and executive coaching and the executive team coaching because it's something that I have found through all of my years when I know I'm doing what I should be doing is at the end of the day after I've been with a client, if I have more energy at the end of the day than kind of when I started, I know I was doing what I was meant to do. And that sounds really weird, but like when I'm doing strategic planning and we're at a retreat and I'm facilitating and I'm in front of the group and we're pulling things together and we're making headway and it's not all easy. It's been a hard day. But at the end of the day, if I feel good and I don't feel like, oh God, I just want to go crawl in my bed and hide, to me, that tells me I'm doing what for
Yes.
me, it's natural, even though it's hard work, but I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. This is good stuff for me to do. If
Yeah.
I'm doing some other types of things and it's just exhausting and I'm waiting for the clock to tick by so I can go, okay, we're done. Thanks for the day. I know I need to stop doing that type of work.
Yeah. That's a really good point to bring up because I think sometimes we wonder, is this the right path I'm on? Is this what I'm doing? And for myself this summer, it's like I'm doing all these things and I finally said, you know what? I don't enjoy this. I don't
Mhm.
enjoy it. What what do I need to go back to? And I go back to my roots. Why did I get started in this in the first place? What is it that I really enjoyed? And I made that change and I didn't lose momentum with what I was doing. I became more streamlined and
Mhm.
was able to keep going. And it's like I love doing the podcasts. I love helping people get their books written. I love doing the formatting. These are the things I really love to do. And working in a membership that I love now instead of one that I feel like I'm just forcing everything every day, every week. And it's
Mhm.
like, why am I not enjoying this? Because it's not that it was a membership, it was the wrong one.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's difficult at times, but if you're enjoying it while it's difficult, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really true. And as you're talking, I'm also reflecting on a conversation I had with one of my team members a couple of years ago when, the period in time and everybody's faced it in business is, the calendar is looking a little light. There's not a whole lot that's booked on the calendar coming up.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what the opportunity was that we were looking at. And I said, well, maybe we should go after that. And she said, Liz, if you get it, you're not going to want to work with that group. It's not the type of group that you like to work with. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. She's
Yeah.
right. So it was a situation of wasn't that desperate for the money. So do I want to waste time going after a target audience or a target market that I would do the work and at the end of the day I'd go, oh God, thank God, okay, that's over with. No, it's not fair to them, and it
Yeah.
wasn't going to be fair to me, and I, it's harder for me to be at my best if I'm not in the right
Right.
space where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. I think one of the hardest things that entrepreneurs have to do is what to do in the waiting.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, like you said, sometimes the calendar's a little light. And it's like, well, that's okay. This may be the time you can really get some of those books you've been wanting to read about a certain, I don't know, mindset or skill or something you wanted to do. Or you finally get to go outside and dig up the yard, put
Mhm.
in the garden like you always wanted to do, do something for yourself. And
Mhm.
or maybe it's time to look at okay, this is where everything's going, and it's okay that it's slow right now because this gives me a chance to breathe. It gives me a chance to make sure I've got all my structure in place because as soon as it picks up, I'm not going to have time to do all these other things. So it's time to take a little bit of see what needs to be done, do some housekeeping, as it were, in the business and
Hmm.
take care of that. We don't have to hit it hard all the time. In fact, I think if we hit it hard all the time, we get burnt out. And then it's like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
Even though you may really enjoy it, if you're burnt out with it, it's not good.
Yeah. Another thing that has been a real help for me was advice I received when I was writing one of my first books. And the advice was be careful with whatever topic you pick, whether it's for a book or, what your services are or who your target client base should be. But in this particular case, it was for a book because this woman said, because if the book takes off, you're going to be talking about it for at least the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my gosh, really? Because I had been kind of mulling over just I had some time. I was going to whip out another book, and I was like, oh, I don't want that to happen. No, I don't want to get pigeonholed in that category if that book takes off. But the same thing kind of applies to what we're talking about. When times are low, I can very easily get desperate and go, let me just find something. I'll just find
Yeah.
something. And it's easy to kind of follow that shiny object and say, well, I'll just take a couple projects over here. But if that industry picks up, you might get sucked into that rabbit hole and it's going to take you away from where you want to be and where you should be.
Right, right. And it might be a good rabbit hole. You never know,
You never
but
know.
well,
Mhm.
still taking you away from what your original path was, what
Right.
you really wanted to pursue. Tell you another thing with writing a book, and I have seen this happen. I I heard it, and it's not that I didn't believe it. It was just like, oh, that's an interesting concept. I'd never heard that before. Whatever your book is going to be about, the chapter you're writing in, if it's for somebody else or if it's your own book, those things are going to start happening. So if you don't want to write a book about scarcity, or you don't want to write a book about sabotaging, don't do it.
Hmm.
Because you don't want those things to start coming alive. And I don't know so much if it's that or if all of a sudden we become aware of what's going on. We start
Hmm.
becoming aware of things. And I have to confess, I said, sure, I'll write a book about me versus me, about how we sabotage our lives. And I thought, that's no big deal. It's not that big. Well, thanks to that book, I found out that I really did sabotage myself at times. And I
Hmm.
thought, whoa, how long has this been going on? I didn't even
Hmm.
know I'd been doing it. And so it was an eye opener. So we have to be careful about the topic we choose too. But I love what you said is, yeah, if this takes off, this is going to be a big part of your life for a few years.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's really important to think about. Now, don't be discouraged, our audience, about writing a book. Don't be discouraged about that at all, because there are ways to fit things in together. You can grow it in harmony. And if you're writing a book that's going along with what you're doing, then it's good because you're both going to get propelled at that point, the book and the business.
Hmm.
And it's hard to tell ourselves no. It's hard
Hmm.
to tell ourselves, take a break. It's okay if it's slow. It's not going to stay that way.
Hmm.
And maybe this is your time if it's slow. Find out why. Find out what's really going on. Because there might just be one little adjustment you need to make.
Or it could be just if you're in a cyclical business.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
in my business, invariably July and August are slow. Most of my clients are not doing strategic planning in July and August. It
Yeah.
picks up in the fall. September, October, November, very heavy. Early in the year, January, February, March, April, very heavy. So it also pays to understand what your industry cycle is.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really good because, you can go do fun things during those 2 slow months of the year.
Hmm.
I'll think about it.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are your plans for the future? You're working on this, you're doing great, you're loving it. And it's like, do you still have have like a different vision. You know, a lot of times we have this idea, this dream, this vision, and then we get there. And then it's like, okay, now what do I do?
Oh yeah, and it's interesting because it's about every 10 to 15 years, as I look back through my career, it takes a turn. There's some kind of a pivot in it. And so where I'm at right now, 3 years ago, my husband and I sold an office building that we had, and it was COVID, and luckily we sold it even during COVID.
Oh, wow.
But that was happening regardless. And um, it was just a situation. My husband is a bit older than I am, and he was purposely pulling back. He has an engineering business. He was purposely pulling back on his engineering business and slowing down a little bit. And it was like, well, what do I want to do? How do I want to continue to work? Because I still do want to continue to work very much. I love what I do. And it's taken honestly a couple years to kind of figure out what does that look like, but the clarity really came true this year, because my husband and I travel very well together. He's a phenomenal trip planner, and we were able to go to a conference in Bali, and then New Zealand and Tahiti, and it was one of these trips where the people at the conference in Bali just reignited my love of speaking and traveling and speaking. And so
Nice.
where I am right now, it kind of all fixed together because I said I've been pulling back on the training part of my business anyway, because that tends to keep me locked in over a long-term period of time. So I
Right.
would do long-term training. Um, but the business advisory and coaching I can do from anywhere. And the keynote speaking obviously allows me to travel. My husband travels with me. And so we're able to go places, meet with great friends, great clients. I do my thing. And then we take off and we go someplace else or we come home. So I do that plus my other consulting work. And it's really now looking at building up that side of my business even more, to really make it something that is enjoyable and just keeps revenue streams happy.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. So it sounds like you do most of this by yourself, or do you have a team that you work with?
I transitioned my team. I have one person who used to be on staff that I've contracted with now. And then with my clients for consulting projects,
Hmm.
when I need, typically it's an HR consultant that I'll need. I'll bring in an HR
Okay.
consultant that'll do help with compensation studies and things like that.
Okay.
But for most of the work that I do with my clients now, it's me in an advisory capacity with them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice. Then you really aren't responsible for a whole team taking
No.
care of things. Yeah. Yeah.
No. And I can tell you when I transitioned, my staff and got rid of the staff and just now have the one contract, the not having overhead like that for the first time in 31 years
Mm.
was a nice change. Yeah.
Oh,
But
good.
again, it was a shift of trying to figure out how much support do I need and how
Right.
much don't I need? Because I'm transitioning a lot with my business, and a lot of the support staff work and the types of work that needed their assistance, I'm not doing as much anymore. So it was a matter of figuring out how much do I really need?
Yeah. So was it hard to say goodbye to your team?
Not really, because I'm still in touch with them.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't just fire anybody. I mean, the one key person, we talked for about a good year. And I said,
Oh, okay.
basically, I can't transition this business until I know you're taken care of. So I need to find out from you,
Good.
do you want to work full time someplace? Because it's not going to be for me anymore. So if it's going to be full time someplace else, that's fine. Let's work out a transition plan. If you want to still do some work with me, I would love it. What would that look like in your world? Because here's how it could work in my world, and then we just have to figure out how much time that would encompass, and that's what she agreed to, and that's what we did. So.
Was when you first were getting your team together, was it because you said, okay, I have so much to do here, I can't do it all by myself, I need to start hiring people? Or what was the thought process on getting your team?
Well, I needed this one key person who is still with me. She actually started working with my husband's company, and we shared an office building. And
Okay.
so I would contract with his company for, a certain number of hours of her time every month. And she would help with basic administrative support, but also did my tech work. She did my website and other things like that.
Okay.
Um, and then when the recession of 2008 hit, it really hit the construction industry hard. My husband's company is engineering firm. It hit the business hard. And so I transitioned her from his company over to my company. And then it just became a matter of, like, for instance, in 2016 was, um, until recently, the biggest year I'd ever had in business. And I was dropping balls because I had so much to do. I had,
Uh-huh.
too many speaking engagements and all the logistics that goes with that, back and forth, plus my consulting clients, plus my training clients. I was starting to drop balls. And so I
Oh,
really
yeah, that's
needed
not good.
needed her to come on even more time with me. And basically then she was completely with my company and really full time from there on out. Um, and then I also had a couple other part-time staff members that would come on and help with various projects and things like that. But yeah, I mean, we've been together, I think, almost 19 years. So it's been a good long-term relationship that just, it needed to transition. It was hard, but we've done it. So.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about, transitioning with things. I'm not that far yet, but I'm glad you brought it up because I know there are entrepreneurs who are at that point. I just kind of want to ask, how does your husband fit in with all of this? You said you shared an office. How did that go? And why would you have I mean, most entrepreneurs work from home. So why did you choose an office building versus working from home?
Well, as I said, we live in South Central Pennsylvania. We moved here from the Washington, D.C. area. And when we moved here in 1996, we both worked from our home. He had
Oh,
a basement was finished. He had his office there. I had an office on the first floor. And at that time, working from home was viewed like, oh, you really don't have a business. You work from home.
oh.
Um, which was,
Say
which was,
that, and it's like
yeah.
difference doesn't matter.
Yeah, which was kind of funny at the time, but his business took off. He was growing. He needed more space and he needed
Right.
employees, and he was also in a partnership at the time. And so an office building became available, and we purchased it. And so we shared an office building. We never shared an office. We shared an office
Right.
building. So he had offices on one side, and I had offices on the other, and we rented out additional space. And
Nice.
it worked great because
Good
really
planning.
I had nothing to do with his business and he had nothing to do with my business in the daily operations of it, other than both of us being advisors to the other on the company. Um, and so when it came time to transition, his business, I had said he was already starting to decide to pull back and slow down a little bit. His business didn't need the office space anymore. Mine didn't because, well, COVID had also happened, and my team was pretty much able to work remote anyway, because anytime the kids had been growing up, anytime any one of their kids was sick or they were off of school, they were working from home way before COVID and Zoom ever hit. They were
Right.
always working remote. So transitioning with COVID was not a big deal for us at
Good.
all.
Good.
Um, and in fact, it just became, why do we still have this office building? Neither one of us needs it. Right now, we don't have any other tenants in there.
Oh,
Let's get rid
yeah.
of it and get rid of the headache and the overhead. And so then it was just a matter of, finishing out our offices here in our home. So it worked out really well.
Yeah. And that's really good. I like the way you thought of the office building. Not only did you just went and bought the building, instead of just looking, I'll just rent here, I'll just rent that, but you bought the building and then you made another income with it by renting out the other rooms. How did you come up with the idea to purchase an office building and then rent the rooms out and not become overwhelmed with what you were doing? Did you have someone who managed that for you?
Well, it's a really good question. And we're fortunate in that, again, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So I grew up, my parents had a mobile home park. And so I grew up helping my brother eventually took over the park. But I grew up hearing around the dinner table the basics of running a business. Basically, you needed positive cash flow and
Right.
collecting monthly rents and being a landlord per se. And then my husband, being an engineer in land development, he understands property and land management and things like that. And so when we found this office building, again, because he needed the space more than I did initially, and it had extra office space, both of us had the plan that whatever tenants we would put in there, ideally, they could be tenants that would be logical tangent support businesses to our respective businesses.
Oh,
And so it
smart.
would make sense for clients to want to come and meet there. So even if they weren't meeting with me per se, we had a financial advisor who rented space from us. Well, you've got a lot of business owners who are financial advisors, and he could refer them to me if they needed someone to help with the strategic plan, succession plan, transitioning their business to the next
Right.
generation, to their children, whatever. My husband, being a civil engineer, we had a surveying company that rented space for a number of years, because you can't have engineering if you don't have surveyors and land development. And so it just made a lot of sense that we could help one another bring business in for our respective businesses by reaching out and being intentional about who we invited to rent space from us.
Right. So it is a different way of thinking, a different way of looking at things, of how you handle the situation. I mean, I have to look at things. It's like, rejection. Somebody says no, and it's like, now it's like, oh, come on, I haven't had my 100 no's today. Come on, give them to me.
Mm-hmm.
And and then it's not taking things personal, realizing that people are at different times in their path, and maybe they're just not ready for you yet. Maybe they're scared mentally. They're ready business wise, but mentally, that's like, I just don't know if we can. And so we have to say, that's okay. I'm still here when you're ready. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe somebody else is better for you. And realizing that maybe there is somebody who's better for them. Find that person for them, then they'll remember you. It's like, oh, I remember you, we were going to do business together and you said no because I wasn't right for you, or I wasn't right for them. But you did show me somebody else who was. So we need to start thinking more that way and not looking at everybody as competition. I mean, competitive is okay, but if we're always in competition with each other, I think we end up losing ground instead of supporting each other. And yeah, so I'm just gonna stop on that point. It's like it
Well,
just hammered
it
on.
as you're talking, something came to my mind also, and I think it's not just having a business mindset versus a consumer's mindset. It's getting clear in what is the value that I bring to them, what is the benefit I bring to them, what can I really help them with that's going to make their life easier, or their business easier, or their job as a leader, in my case, easier. And it sounds simple, but it takes time to really get confident in yourself. So when you do get the no, instead of going, oh my gosh, they didn't like me, it's not about they didn't like you. It's about the value that you've articulated to them that you can bring. For some reason, they don't see it yet, or it's not a right fit for them now. Um,
Right,
and
right.
it's really hard. It takes a long time for, um, it's taken a long time for me to get really confident in, this is what I do, this is what I can do with you. And I'm confident in saying that because I have a book of business and I've got a history of a client portfolio that says this works.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's the relationships from clients who, I mean, I just talked to a client last week, Wednesday, that I honestly, I haven't talked to in probably 20 years.
Oh,
And he called and left a voice message for me. I called him back. I couldn't believe it was him, because he said my things on LinkedIn pop up in his feed all the time. And he said to himself, I need to talk to Liz again sometime. He said, you know what? I'm going to try calling her right now. And it was such a nice surprise, but I'll be egotistical for a moment. It made me feel so good that here's a guy that I haven't worked with him in probably 20 years. And when we worked together, he's a wonderful guy. We got along great. The projects were good, but he obviously valued what I did with him enough that 20 years later, number one, he follows me on LinkedIn. But number
Yeah.
two, he feels good about me enough that he's like, hey, I want to see what she's doing. I want to talk to her in person again.
Yeah.
And that makes me think of advice my husband gave me when I was starting out, to what you were saying earlier about kind of doubting yourself and what am I doing? Because when we first moved here to Pennsylvania, I had already started my business and I had to kind of leave some of my clients behind, again because it was before the internet, before Zoom. Um,
Mhm.
and so I had to kind of start over again in Pennsylvania. And it was a really hard mental time for me. I felt like I was failing. And I remember one morning I was just down, and my husband's like, "What is wrong?" And I said, "I can help other people be successful in their business, but I can't get my own going. I mean, what is wrong with me?" And it was probably a good couple weeks. And finally he said, "Liz, when you are good, the business will come. When you're good, the business will come, and you're good. The business is going to come. You just got to give yourself and give your clients time to find you." And it sounds cliche, but it was true. Because what I do, people can't just say, "Yeah, can you come in and start Thursday?" They have to coordinate with an entire leadership team, or they have to
Right.
coordinate with the board of directors. It has to get on a schedule 9 months out, a year out. So it takes time for them to put the pieces in play to even get it thinking that this might happen. And then they can start talking to me and then we can nail it. It's very rare that, client will call and say, "Hey, can you be here next Tuesday?" It did happen a couple of weeks ago, but it doesn't happen that often that a new client calls and says, 3 days from now, can you be here? It's
Yeah.
with what I do, there's a longer lead time.
Yeah. So there's that waiting we were talking about
Mhm.
earlier, is you have to be patient in waiting. It reminds me of people praying, and it's like, okay, I'm praying for this, I'm praying for this. The answer is either going to be yes, no, or wait. And when the answer is wait, we're like, oh, it just means no. Oh, it just means you don't have time for me. And it's like, no, because maybe you're ready, but the other person or the other thing or whatever you're praying about is not ready. And there's things that have to fall into place. And maybe they're okay, but they want to be really good for you. So you've got to wait for the other things to happen before you can step in and make it happen. Or maybe you're not quite ready yet. Maybe there's still some things you need to learn or have available before it can happen. And then when it does happen, like you said, when it happens, then it really happens and it's great. But
Mhm.
uh yeah, that waiting, that is so hard.
It's hard. It's hard, yeah, because that's,
Yeah.
all the self-doubt can start creeping in, and
Yes.
you just don't know. So,
Yeah. It's just going to be great when it finally does happen. So are there any last thoughts that you have for our audience, for the entrepreneurs out there?
um, I guess my final thoughts would be, to circle back to what we talked about earlier, and look at the things that you've done in your life, whether it's professionally or in a volunteer position or, in your community, whatever it might be, that when you did it, it just seemed natural. It was easy for you, even though you were working. It felt easy. It somewhat felt like second nature. And when someone's ever said, "How do you do that?" And you kind of go, "I don't know, I just do it." Um, Pay attention to that, because there's a thread that probably runs through all of those different parts of your life that give you an indication of what you could and should be doing
Mm.
to have your own business, or the type of business that's going to make you happy, that's going to make you wake up every day and not feel like, "Oh gosh, I have to go to work," but it's like, "I get to do this today." It's a different
Yeah.
attitude, it's a different mindset, it's a different level of energy. And
Oh yeah.
I've just found I make more money when I'm doing things that I like doing, because I don't have a problem doing them and I want to do more of it. And I get more experimental with it and I don't feel like I'm being dragged down. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll just,
True.
look for your red thread.
That's right. I like that. I like that. Thank you so much for being here, Liz. How can people get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me on social media. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. My call sign there is at Liz Weber CMC. Weber has one B. I'm also on Instagram and I'm also on Facebook. Liz Weber
Okay.
CMC. Mhm.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today and truly enjoyed this. And you just really brought a whole different aspect than what we've had before. And I think it was so needed. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today on Wisdom on the Front Porch with your host, Ellis Kirkpatrick. You can find us on our website, wisdomonthefrontporch.com, see previous episodes of the podcast, and view issues of the magazine. Did you know you can submit questions, leave reviews, or suggest topics? You can also tell us where your favorite front porch location is and what it means to you. We hope you gain value and insight from today's or previous talks. We appreciate your support for us so we can continue to provide value and expertise to you and others. Join in next week when we bring you another great insight into the world of entrepreneur culture and lifestyle. Make today a great day. Always believe that something wonderful is going to happen.